Hey guys, tonight we're re-diving into a story that starts with me schlepping through 12 long years of being labeled a freeloader, feeling the weight of every whispered judgment, as if it were a backpack stuffed with rocks. You'll probably survive, but, honestly, you might not. Just kidding, mostly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're retuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. I drag myself out of bed every morning to a kitchen that smells faintly like burnt coffee and yesterday's disappointment. My parents, bless their hearts, never quite hid their skepticism. Still doing nothing, they'd ask, eyes narrowing as if they could see through my skin straight to my laziness. I nod, maybe mumble something about looking for inspiration, but inside, I feel that familiar sting. 12 years of echoes like this: friends who forgot my birthday, relatives who pretended I didn't exist at reunions, colleagues from part-time gigs who now flaunt their promotions. I remember one particularly sharp morning when a neighbor peeked over the fence, asking if I'd considered doing something useful. I smile and wave, but inside, my stomach knots. Life has a peculiar rhythm when you're a perpetual outsider. I remember the weird comfort of my old threadbare hoodie that smelled faintly of rain and lingering pizza. It became armor against the judgments hurled at me, a strange security blanket. Some nights I'd lie in the dark and listen to the hum of the refrigerator, imagining it as applause for my invisible achievements. Oddly enough, that's when ideas started creeping in, soft and hesitant. I scribbled them on napkins, on backs of receipts, even inside the margins of old library books. I think the funniest part, if you can call it that, was the tiny victories of survival: finding $1 in a coat pocket, mastering instant ramen in under 3 minutes, avoiding the awkward conversation at family dinners. It was survival comedy, the kind that made me shake my head and laugh softly, because what else could I do? There's a rhythm to it, a slow, almost ASMR-like cadence to moving through life unnoticed, yet fully alert. Sometimes, the absurdity hit me in the most mundane ways, like the time my cat, who, by the way, judged me silently but with unwavering loyalty, decided my laptop keyboard was her throne. I could swear she smirked as she typed strings of nonsense. And I thought, well, if historians ever dig up these cat-made sentences, they'll still debate whether they were profound. And, as I chuckle at that mental image, I realize that these years, though humiliating on the surface, are quietly shaping me in ways no one outside my tiny apartment could ever guess. Every night I'd lie back, stare at the ceiling, and let the shadows play tricks on my imagination. I can still feel the slight chill from the draft under the window, the rough texture of the old blanket against my shoulder, the faint click of the streetlight outside syncing with the beat of my restless heart. I imagine the world beyond these walls, the possibilities, the careers, the relationships, and I whisper to myself, maybe tomorrow, just maybe, I'll start turning whispers into action. That's the seed. That's where this long, strange journey quietly begins. The next morning, as the sunlight creeps lazily through the blinds, I get another reminder that life has a cruel sense of humor. My phone buzzes with a text from an old friend I haven't spoken to in years. Heard you still while doing nothing. I stare at it for a moment, feeling the familiar thud in my chest, a mix of embarrassment and the strange spark of motivation. Sometimes, you need someone else's disbelief to ignite your own determination. I put the phone down and let the silence of my apartment wrap around me like a heavy, slightly scratchy blanket. Walking to the corner coffee shop, I notice small details I've always ignored: the chipped paint on the lamppost, the peculiar pattern of shadows on the pavement, the way a breeze makes the sign outside flutter like a hesitant heartbeat. I sip my black coffee, tasting its bitterness as if it mirrors my own life up to this point. A man at the next table coughs in a peculiar rhythm, almost like Morse code. I can't help but think that somewhere in the world, even small annoyances are trying to tell you something. Historians would debate whether noticing these tiny quirks actually makes a difference, but in my mind it does. It's during one of these mundane walks that I stumble upon a flyer pinned to a lamppost. Startup ideas meet, or welcome. My first instinct is to laugh at the absurdity. Me, a startup. The thought feels alien, yet irresistibly compelling. I tuck the flyer into my pocket, and for the first time in a long while, I feel a flicker of possibility. I imagine myself in a room full of strangers, sharing ideas that might just change everything. There's a shiver of excitement, like the brush of cool wind on a hot summer night, reminding me that life doesn't always have to be a loop of ridicule and inaction back home. I spread the flyer across my kitchen table, the peeling wallpaper, the lingering smell of yesterday's toast, even the hum of the old refrigerator. All these details feel sharper somehow, like my world has been subtly rewired for attention. I start jotting down random ideas, scribbles that range from the ridiculous to the strangely practical. A small, almost imperceptible grin spreads across my face when I realize that this, right here, is the spark that could light a long-buried fire. My old hoodie sits on the chair, and I drape it over my shoulders, feeling an absurd sense of comfort, as if it knows I'm finally stepping into something. Later that evening, my parents wander into the kitchen. They eye the scattered notes, my laptop glowing with half-formed plans, and exchange a glance that's half skepticism, half curiosity. "You're actually thinking of starting something?" my mom asks, her voice tinged with disbelief. I nod, shrug, and mutter, "Maybe." Their eyebrows raise almost in sync, a silent chorus of doubt, but for once, I don't feel the sting. Instead, I savor it like a tiny, bitter chocolate square. Life is funny that ways. Sometimes you need a little judgment to realize your own stubbornness. That night, lying in bed, I traced the patterns of shadows across the ceiling, the hum of the fan, a gentle lullaby. I think about the flyer, the coffee shop, the odd cough, and I realize that these seemingly small, ridiculous details are nudging me toward a new path. Historians still argue that tiny moments of randomness can pivot someone's life, but I'm beginning to suspect they might be right, and as I drift into a light, restless sleep, I can't help but imagine what it will feel like to finally act, to take the first steps toward something bigger than 12 years of whispered judgment. That night, sleep refuses to come quietly. I toss and turn, staring at the ceiling fan casting slow, hypnotic shadows, imagining all the ways my life could take a turn. Then, like a spark in a dark room, an idea strikes me so sharply that I almost sit up in bed. A project, small but daring, something that could exist outside the suffocating judgment of everyone who's ever called me a freeloader. I grab a notebook, scratching ideas down under the dim glow of a bedside lamp. Some are laughably bad, like a nap that rates socks by fluffiness, but others the ones that make my chest tighten feel possible, almost tangible. I start with research, which mostly means scrolling late into the night, clicking through forums, watching tutorials, and jotting down notes in messy handwriting that only I can decipher. The apartment smells faintly of instant noodles, and the quiet hum of the refrigerator becomes a strangely soothing rhythm, somewhere between watching a TED Talk on entrepreneurship and reading a forum post about small business taxes. I feel my pulse quicken. Historians still debate whether late-night epiphanies actually change lives, but right now I feel like I've found a secret passage. By dawn, the ideas multiply, each one more daring than the last. I visualize a small startup, nothing glamorous yet, but real, something I can touch, tweak, and grow. I imagine a tiny office, lights flickering slightly, the faint aroma of burnt coffee brewing in the corner, and a team of quirky individuals sharing the same dream. The absurdity of it makes me chuckle. I've barely survived on ramen and hand-me-down hoodies, and now I'm sketching office layouts in the margins of my notebook. The morning brings a new energy. I walk to the local library, carrying the notebook like a sacred artifact. The librarians glance at me curiously, as if sensing that today I might be slightly more dangerous than usual. I sit at a long wooden table, scattered with papers, open books, and a laptop whose battery has clearly seen better days. I note down every detail, from cost estimates to potential names, visualizing each step as if I'm already living it. The quiet clicks of keyboards around me are almost musical, a soft ASMR rhythm that makes plotting a company feel strangely comforting. On the way back, I stop at a small stationery shop and pick up pens in cheerful colors, thinking, perhaps unnecessarily, that the right tools might somehow make the universe take me more seriously. The shopkeeper eyes my collection of neon pens with mild suspicion, and I wink, feeling like a conspirator in my own improbable plan. Life has a way of sprinkling humor into the tiniest moments, the unexpected joy of colored ink, the odd comfort of a new notebook, the small rituals that make the abstract feel tangible. Later, back in my apartment, I start experimenting. I sketch logos that look comically amateurish, draft emails I'll never send, and imagine pitching ideas to imaginary investors in my living room. My cat, of course, provides commentary by sitting squarely on the notebook, pawing at the pages as if to remind me that even my plans must pass the test of feline approval. I laugh quietly to myself. It's ridiculous, it's chaotic, and yet, it's real. This is the first night I feel more like a creator than a freeloader. And as the fan hums softly overhead, I realize the first spark of action has been lit. A small flame that might just survive the storm of doubt, ridicule, and fear I've carried for 12 long years. The next week feels like stepping into a parallel universe. My bank account still groans and protests zeros stretching across the screen like an endless desert, but there's a peculiar excitement in balancing the absurdity of my financial reality with the thrilling potential of my ideas. Bills pile up on the counter, crumpled and ignored, yet somehow their presence sharpens my focus. I pore over them like a historian poring through dusty manuscripts, noting each due date, calculating possibilities, and laughing quietly at how creatively bad my money management has been. Some nights, I imagine a tiny parade of anthropomorphic dollar bills mocking me with every late notice. I start tracking every expense, every stray coin, every missed opportunity. It's tedious, it's awkward, and I even catch myself muttering phrases like, maybe if I just sell these old hoodies. Historians still debate whether obsessing over minutiae strengthens resolve, or simply delays inevitable despair. But for me, these tiny acts become strangely empowering. I discover that the act of accounting, of confronting reality head-on, can be oddly meditative, the hum of the fluorescent kitchen light adding a soothing rhythm. Meanwhile, the neighborhood seems more alive than usual. On my morning walks to the convenience store, I notice the peculiar symmetry of cracked sidewalks, the way a stray newspaper dances in the wind, the faint smell of roasting coffee beans from a corner cafe. Everything becomes data, inspiration, a subtle reminder that even the mundane holds possibilities. I imagine little stories behind each passing stranger, someone rushing to work, someone nursing a coffee, someone laughing at a private joke, and I realize these vignettes might just inform the human side of the venture I am dreaming up. By midweek I decide to test a small idea, an online experiment that costs almost nothing but could provide a glimpse of what people actually want. I send out a few emails, post in obscure forums, and wait with the patience of someone who has been denied validation for over a decade. The responses trickle in, some curious, some dismissive, and some surprisingly encouraging. It's absurdly satisfying, like finding a single bright seashell on an otherwise rocky shore. I chuckle at the minor victories, the way my cat eyes each tiny envelope notification as if judging my strategic prowess. One night, while working under the dim kitchen light, I pause to sip lukewarm coffee and notice a crack in the ceiling. It's small, jagged, and unassuming, but I find myself staring at it for minutes, imagining it as a canyon, a symbol of the obstacles I've climbed. Life has a strange way of offering metaphors in the most banal forms: a ceiling crack, a hum of a refrigerator, a flickering streetlight. These details, historians argue, shape perception as much as grand events do. I nod at the ceiling, silently acknowledging that my path will be messy, unpredictable, and occasionally absurd, yet entirely mine. By the end of the week, I feel a subtle shift. I still have no steady income, still face judgmental looks from relatives, still rely on instant noodles, but I sense movement beneath the surface, a stirring energy. It's like hearing the first distant notes of a song you don't yet know, but can feel in your bones. I lie in bed, letting the fan hum lull me into a calm alertness, aware that this delicate, almost imperceptible rhythm of trying, failing, observing, and adjusting is slowly bending my life toward something new. The small experiments begin to add up. I realize that tiny actions, no matter how insignificant they seem, start creating a rhythm, a beat that carries me forward. I take on odd tasks, designing a rudimentary website using free templates, reaching out to obscure suppliers, testing prototypes that wobble more than they function. Some days I feel like a circus performer balancing on a tightrope made of spaghetti, but in a way, it's exhilarating. Historians still debate whether repeated failures teach resilience or simply accumulate stress. But right now I feel both, tired and strangely invincible at once. I remember one particularly chaotic afternoon. My laptop keyboard is sticky from last week's spilled coffee, papers are scattered like confetti across the floor, and the cat is perched on top of a precarious stack of books. I fumble through emails, some promising, some clearly spam, and I let out a sigh that is both relief and exasperation. If life were a video game, I mutter, I'd be stuck in the tutorial level for eternity. The humor keeps me sane, a tiny mental buffer against the stress of figuring out how to transform ideas into reality. On another day, I attempt a small social experiment, reaching out to strangers online for advice. Pretending I'm more experienced than I actually am, responses range from dismissive to surprisingly generous, and I take notes on everything, even the weirdest advice. One person suggests branding my entire concept around the chaos of your wardrobe, a notion so ridiculous I can't help but laugh. The absurdity, however, sparks a new angle I hadn't considered. Sometimes creativity is just mischief in disguise. Amid all this, there are tangible daily challenges: running errands with no car, dealing with the flaky Wi-Fi that crashes mid, and somehow finding time to cook meals that aren't instant noodles. I notice the textures of these small struggles. The grit of sand in the shoes after a brisk walk, the faint hum of the refrigerator during late-night work sessions, the warmth of sunlight through half-closed blinds. These sensory details anchor me, reminding me that even in chaos, life continues, persistent and oddly comforting. By midweek I have a small prototype ready. It's crude, a little embarrassing, and nothing to brag about, but it exists. I send it to a few trusted acquaintances for feedback. Some scoff, some genuinely smile, and some respond with questions that force me to think harder. Humor sneaks in unexpectedly. I laugh at the fact that my first prototype includes a feature I personally find unnecessary, but insisted on adding because it sounded cool. My cat taps a paw against the laptop screen, as if to remind me that perfection is overrated and curiosity is everything. One evening, I sit back in my worn chair and review the week. I notice a strange satisfaction building, a quiet affirmation that I am, at last, moving. The small victories: emails answered, prototypes sent, ideas refined, create a tapestry of progress, delicate yet undeniable. Historians still argue whether incremental steps are meaningful without immediate recognition. But lying in bed, listening to the gentle hum of the fan, I understand their quiet power. Each step, each stumble, each laugh is a thread weaving the beginning of something bigger than 12 long years of judgment. Failure, of course, doesn't stop knocking at my door. By mid-month, I hit the inevitable wall. A supplier cancels at the last minute, a potential collaborator vanishes without explanation, and my prototype reveals flaws I hadn't anticipated. The apartment feels smaller somehow, the walls pressing in as if reminding me of every year I spent drifting aimlessly. I slump into my chair, rubbing my temples, trying not to let frustration spiral. Humor helps. I mutter, well, at least my cat hasn't judged me too harshly today. Even in moments of exasperation, the tiny absurdities of life serve as lifelines. I spend the night dissecting every misstep, scribbling furiously in my notebook, trying to see patterns amidst chaos. Each failure is analyzed with meticulous attention, as though I'm conducting an anthropological study of my own incompetence. Historians still debate whether obsessively analyzing failure strengthens character or simply prolongs agony. But for me, there's clarity in it. I discover small truths: deadlines are flexible, Expectations are often illusions, and sometimes people who seem helpful are actually just mirrors of your own insecurity. Oddly, inspiration appears in the strangest forms. While reorganizing my desk, I find a crumpled receipt from years ago, an artifact of a forgotten lunch, and it sparks a memory of resilience. I laugh softly, imagining historians sifting through my drawer and debating whether this receipt was a turning point in my entrepreneurial journey. The absurdity of it is comforting. It reminds me that life's lessons are often hidden in mundane details. During one late-night session, I attempt to mock-pitch my project to the empty apartment. I pace, I gesture, I stumble over words, yet something magical happens. I begin to believe my own story. My cat, naturally, provides critical feedback, weaving between my legs with a disdainful flick of her tail. I laugh, the tension easing, realizing that even failure carries entertainment value. If nothing else, there's an ASMR-like rhythm to this rehearsal. The scrape of paper, the click of keys, the soft hum of the refrigerator forming a strangely soothing background track. By the end of the week, the pattern emerges. Every setback teaches something unexpected. I adjust supplier lists, rethink time, and refine ideas with a growing sense of confidence. I also notice a peculiar side effect: my perspective on people shifts. I begin to recognize hidden strengths in friends and acquaintances I once dismissed. Humor creeps back into my routine, especially in small, sarcastic observations about my own persistent misfortune. It's a delicate balance of humility and audacity. A dance, historians would argue, has propelled many innovators from obscurity to influence. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I feel a rhythm forming: failure, reflection, adjustment, and small, deliberate action. I savor the patterns, the soft click of the fan, the faint creak of the old apartment settling, and realize that each setback is a subtle step forward. The past 12 years of being labeled a freeloader no longer feel like chains. They feel like training, odd preparation for the chaotic, thrilling journey I'm just beginning. The whisper of possibility grows louder, coaxing me to rise again tomorrow, to act, to create, and to persist in ways that might surprise even myself. Then, almost out of nowhere, a familiar face re-enters my life. I'm walking down the street, notebook clutched in one hand, coffee in the other, when I bump literally into someone I thought I'd long forgotten. It's a former classmate, the kind who always excelled effortlessly, while I was quietly labeled lazy and unmotivated. Our eyes meet, a flicker of recognition and surprise, and I brace myself for judgment. But instead, they smile, a little awkwardly, and ask what I've been up to. As we talk, I realize the encounter is more than coincidence. This person, now surprisingly open-minded and curious, offers insights I hadn't considered. They ask questions about my project, challenge assumptions, and point out possibilities I might have missed. I notice the absurd irony: someone who once epitomized societal expectations is now a collaborator, a partner in shaping the ideas that could define my future. Historians would likely debate whether fate or sheer randomness dictates such reunions, but to me, it feels like a carefully placed puzzle piece. We spend hours in a small cafe, sketches sprawled across napkins, ideas bouncing back and forth with the kinetic energy of a tennis match. I laugh more in that afternoon than I have in weeks, both at the absurdity of our brainstorming and at the small, almost ridiculous details. The barista who insists on giving unsolicited life advice, the stray dog lounging outside with an air of judgment, the coffee that tastes slightly burnt yet somehow comforting. Each quirk adds texture to the day, a reminder that creation rarely exists in sterile perfection. Later, back in my apartment, I reflect on the conversation, the energy, the challenge, the fresh perspective. It's invigorating. I realize that growth is rarely a solo endeavor. Connections, even unexpected ones, shape ideas, broaden understanding, and reveal hidden potential. I can't help but chuckle at the thought. 12 years ago they would have called me a freeloader. Today they are unknowingly contributing to the very venture that will change everything. Life has a peculiar way of turning expectations on their head. That evening, I jot down actionable steps inspired by our meeting. I organize tasks, prioritize projects, and even sketch a rudimentary workflow. The apartment, with its faint hum of the refrigerator and dim lighting, feels like a laboratory of possibility. I pause to stretch, noticing the texture of the old carpet under my bare feet, the soft whir of the fan, and the subtle scent of leftover coffee lingering in the air. It's grounding, a reminder that the extraordinary emerges from ordinaries. As I lie in bed that night, I feel a subtle shift within me. I am no longer merely surviving, no longer just enduring the whispers and doubts of others. I am moving, connecting, building, and the most absurdly wonderful part, those who once doubted me, those who once dismissed me, may very well become part of the foundation of this new life. I close my eyes, letting the soft rhythms of the apartment lull me into a calm alertness, knowing that tomorrow, the work continues, but now with allies, insight, and a quiet, growing confidence. Registering the company feels like stepping into an entirely new universe. The paperwork alone is enough to make my head spin. Forms, tax codes, licenses, signatures, an absurd mountain of bureaucracy that somehow has to be conquered with nothing but a laptop, a pen, and stubborn determination. I sit at the tiny kitchen table, the same one where I scribbled late-night ideas, now buried under piles of official-looking documents. The hum of the refrigerator and the distant city noises become my rhythm, a surprisingly comforting background track as I navigate this legal labyrinth. Filling out the forms, I notice small details that make me chuckle. The section asking for corporate purpose feels hilariously open-ended. I pause, pencil hovering, and think, create a company that defies expectations. Is that specific enough? The absurdity makes me laugh, a soft, self-amused chuckle that vibrates through the empty apartment. Historians might argue that bureaucracy is a test of persistence disguised as paperwork. And in this moment, I'm starting to believe it. The process isn't just tedious, it's revealing. Every checkbox, every declaration, forces me to clarify my vision. I start thinking beyond the vague sketches of a few weeks ago, imagining teams, roles, responsibilities, even a company culture I hope to cultivate. The possibilities begin to solidify, transforming from abstract fantasies into something I can almost touch. And while the financial reality is still a tightrope over a pit of zeros in my bank account, the act of registering the company is a symbolic leap. Officially, I am no longer just a dreamer, I am an entrepreneur, however fledgling. After submitting the paperwork, I sit back and breathe, letting the apartment's soft, humming ambience wash over me. My cat curls up beside my notebook, tail twitching in judgmental approval, and I can't help but laugh. The absurdity of starting a company from a cluttered, half-furnished apartment, with nothing but a threadbare hoodie and some coffee-stained notes, feels deliciously defiant. This is my rebellion against 12 years of being underestimated. In the following days, I begin mapping out my first steps as a registered entity. I create spreadsheets for projected expenses, draft emails to potential partners, and research marketing strategies that don't break the bank. I notice the oddities in the process. Suppliers with confusing pricing structures, web tools that seem intentionally obtuse, even a slightly crooked ceiling lamp casting odd shadows over my notes. These small details, historians would debate, often shape the creative process as much as any grand strategy. By nightfall, I find myself pacing the apartment, notebook in hand, rehearsing emails and pitches aloud. My cat follows, occasionally pawing at the notebook, perhaps to remind me that even in these monumental steps, humor and humility are vital. I laugh at my own overexcitement, imagining an absurd scene where I present this company to a room full of skeptical investors who have no idea that the person in front of them was once labeled a freeloader. And as the fan hums softly overhead, I feel a subtle thrill. This is just the beginning, but already, the rhythm of creation and persistence is unmistakable. The real irony hits when I decide to hire the very people who once judged me. I draft emails, hesitating at each line. Hey, remember how you thought I'd never amount to anything? Want to work for me? I pause, imagining historians in the future debating whether this move was genius or sheer masochism. The absurdity of it makes me chuckle a soft, almost guilty laugh, but deep down I feel a thrill at flipping the script, taking control of the narrative that haunted me for 12 years. Responses trickle in slowly. Some are hesitant, others skeptical, a few surprisingly enthusiastic. I set up informal interviews in my tiny apartment, using the same kitchen table where I registered the company. Papers are strewn about, laptops worry, and my cat, of course, perches like a silent, judgmental observer. One by one, former skeptics sit across from me, unaware that I've prepared a small plan for each, matching their skills to roles they never imagined they'd fill. The interviews are absurdly entertaining. One former critic fiddles nervously with a pen, clearly unsure if they're supposed to scoff or accept. Another cracks a joke about my hoodie still being the same one I wore 12 years ago. I laugh, soft and knowing, and reply with my own sarcastic quip. The room fills with small, human moments, the awkward smiles, the tentative ideas, the quiet acknowledgement that roles have reversed. Historians would debate whether these social dynamics are accidental or deliberate, but I realize it doesn't matter. The energy in the room is electric, charged with possibility. By the end of the week, I have a small, eclectic team. They bring experience, insight, and an odd, often funny energy that keeps the work light even in its seriousness. We start brainstorming, mapping out tasks, and sketching timelines. Humor sneaks in constantly. Someone mislabels a spreadsheet tab, another brings a coffee cup so large it obscures half the keyboard. I laugh quietly, appreciating the absurdity while mentally noting that this chaos is somehow productive. That night, I sit alone with my notebook, reviewing the day. The apartment hums with familiar sounds: the fan, the refrigerator, the distant city street hand. I reflect on how surreal it is. 12 years ago, I was invisible, dismissed, quietly scorned. Now, the people who once doubted me are contributing to the venture that will define my next chapter. It's ironic, humbling, and oddly sweet, and I savor the contrast, letting the small victories, humor, and subtle rhythm of daily life lull me into a sense of quiet satisfaction. The first days with a new team are chaotic in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Meetings feel like juggling flaming torches while riding a unicycle, messy, nerve-wracking, yet strangely exhilarating. Ideas clash, egos bump into one another, and coffee spills on spreadsheets more than once. I can't help but chuckle at the absurdity. Here we are, a motley crew of former critics and underdogs, building something from nothing. Historians still debate whether early chaos predicts long-term success, but for now, it's oddly comforting to see life imitate a slapstick routine. Our workspace is the apartment, cluttered with papers, empty mugs, and the soft hum of my old refrigerator. I notice tiny details that bring levity. The cat dragging a pen across the floor like it's conducting an orchestra. Shadows of blinds slicing across the walls in an almost hypnotic rhythm. The faint smell of burnt toast lingering from breakfast. Humor seeps into every interaction. Someone accidentally calls a spreadsheet a strategy manifest. Another jokingly insists on wearing a superhero cape for motivation. These moments of levity make the long hours bearable, even enjoyable. One afternoon, we hit a serious snag. A supplier cancels last minute, threatening the timeline of our first small project. Tension rises, and the room feels electric with stress. I pause, noticing the absurdity of the situation, and let out a soft laugh. Well, I say, if historians ever study entrepreneurial crises, they'll wonder how much coffee and sarcasm it takes to survive them. My team chuckles, tension easing just enough for creative problem-solving to kick in. We brainstorm alternatives, patch together solutions, and emerge with a plan that, while imperfect, keeps momentum alive. Evenings are reserved for reflection. I sit at the kitchen table, reviewing notes, mapping progress, and quietly noting the oddities of our workflow. The way the cat's tail flicks as if critiquing our strategy. The soft buzz of the fan overhead. The distant traffic that underscores the city's constant motion. These sensory details, though mundane, anchor me. They remind me that success isn't only about grand gestures, it's built in the small, consistent acts of resilience, humor, and observation. By the end of the week, Small victories accumulate. Emails sent. Prototypes refined. Ideas validated. The absurdity of working with former critics turns into a rhythm that feels both ironic and empowering. I lie in bed at night, letting the hum of the fan and the faint city noises lull me into calm alertness. I think about the journey from 12 years of judgment to this chaotic, humorous, hopeful present. Each laugh, each misstep, each tiny success feels like a thread weaving the story of a life finally moving forward, a narrative that is uniquely, wonderfully mine. As the weeks pass, challenges intensify. Cash flow moves like molasses. Deadlines loom like storm clouds, and competitors seem to appear out of nowhere, gleefully ready to outpace us. Each day brings decisions that make my head spin, negotiating contracts, adjusting timelines, and keeping morale afloat. Humor becomes my anchor, I mutter to myself. If survival were an Olympic sport, I'd be training full-time, and even the cat pauses, as if acknowledging the gravity of my sarcasm. Historians still debate whether stress hones resilience or just wears it thin, but for now, I feel a peculiar blend of exhaustion and exhilaration. Temptation to quit lurks at every corner. There are nights when I stare at my dwindling bank balance and the stacks of unpaid bills, feeling the pull of easier, safer paths. I imagine a life of quiet obscurity again, but the thought feels hollow. I remind myself of the flyer, the coffee shop, the odd encounters that reignited my spark. Small sensory details like the hum of the fan, the uneven glow of the kitchen light, or the faint aroma of leftover coffee become grounding anchors, reminding me that persistence is both absurd and vital. Team dynamics grow more complex. Former skeptics occasionally clash, bringing tension into meetings, but these conflicts reveal hidden strengths as well. One team member surprises everyone by resolving a production issue with a wildly creative solution. Another, whom I least expected to contribute, suddenly offers insight that shifts a strategy. I watch, quietly amused, as the very people who doubted me become essential to our success. Humor sneaks in, often a mislabeled spreadsheet, an impromptu joke about our coffee obsession providing relief in high-pressure moments. I start noticing subtle signs of progress. A client expresses interest, a prototype receives positive feedback, and the team begins to develop routines that hint at efficiency. The rhythm of daily operations, though messy, is beginning to feel like music. I savor small victories, a well-received email, a spreadsheet that finally balances, the laughter shared over minor mishaps. These moments, historians would argue, often matter more than the grand gestures because they form the backbone of sustainable growth. By nightfall, I lie in bed, reflecting on the day. The fan hums softly, the apartment creaks faintly, and I let the tension of the day dissolve. Each challenge, every temptation, each unexpected team contribution adds depth to the narrative I'm creating, not just for the company, but for myself. The 12 years of judgment, the whispered doubts, the silent criticisms, they no longer weigh me down. Instead, they provide texture, a backdrop against which my persistence, humor, and quiet audacity shine. And as I drift towards sleep, I feel a tentative but growing confidence. The journey is hard, unpredictable, yet unmistakably moving forward. Then comes our first tangible victory, small but electrifying. A project that had seemed impossibly delicate finally clicks into place. The client's positive feedback lands like a gentle thunderbolt, shaking away doubts and illuminating months of effort. I watch my team, once skeptical, now beaming with pride, and I feel a quiet, almost surreal satisfaction. Humor surfaces unexpectedly. Someone spills coffee in their excitement, and we all laugh, appreciating the absurdity of celebrating minor chaos. Historians might debate whether small wins truly impact momentum, but right now, it feels transformative. I recall the days when I was invisible, dismissed as a freeloader, each judgment like a pinprick in my confidence. Now, the same people who once doubted me are integral to this small triumph. It's ironic, sweet, and quietly vindicating. I noticed tiny, sensory details that make the moment vivid. The hum of the fan mixing with soft keyboard clicks, sunlight filtering unevenly through blinds, the faint smell of leftover pastries from an earlier celebratory snack. Every little detail grounds me in reality, reminding me that success often emerges from the mundane and the chaotic alike. Emails flood in with congratulations and follow-up tasks. I organize them with obsessive attention, noting patterns and opportunities. One team member discovers a quirky but useful shortcut in our workflow. Another cracks a sarcastic joke about finally working for a freeloader, earning a laugh that softens the weight of the past. The interplay of humor, unexpected contributions, and tangible results creates a rhythm I never experienced before, rhythm both chaotic and oddly harmonious. That evening, I sit alone with my notebook, reflecting on the arc of the journey. The apartment hums around me. Familiar noises like the worry fan, the faint ticking of the wall clock, and the cat's occasional padding across the floor forming a soft soundtrack. I trace the steps from the flyer, the late-night sketches, the relentless trial-enderer, to this moment of recognition. Each failure, each laugh, each sensory detail, the smell of coffee, the hum of machines, the rough texture of my old hoodie has led here. Historians still argue that small, persistent actions shape outcomes more than grand gestures, and I nod quietly, realizing they are right. Lying in bed later, I allow myself a rare moment of reflection. The 12 years of whispered judgments, the invisible burden of expectation, the long nights of creative chaos all feel like training. A rhythm has emerged, one built on persistence, observation, humor, and tiny victories. I close my eyes, letting the soft ambient sounds carry me into sleep, the small triumphs lingering as a gentle, reassuring hum in my mind. For the first time, the future feels palpable, alive, and full of quiet possibility. As the weeks turn into months, I begin to see myself as more than just a survivor. I am becoming the narrator of my own story. I reflect on those 12 years labeled as a freeloader, the whispered judgments, the sideways glances, and the small victories that seemed invisible to everyone else. Now, the narrative is mine to rewrite, and I do so deliberately, weaving humor, perseverance, and absurdity into every chapter. I even catch myself chuckling at the memories of old failures, like a historian flipping through dusty yellowed pages and debating their significance. I start documenting everything: decisions, missteps, small wins, and the odd coincidences that feel like they are guiding the journey. The apartment hums quietly, a subtle background score, fan worry, cat padding across the floor, the faint, distant city noise. Each sensory detail is recorded in my mind. The rough texture of the old kitchen table, the faint smell of leftover coffee, the way sunlight hits the notebook at a specific angle in the morning. These ordinary, overlooked details are now rich threads in the tapestry of my story, grounding the abstract chaos of building a company into a tangible, lived reality. One afternoon, I paused to reflect on the people around me, the very same who once doubted me, now integral to the venture's success. I noticed quirks I hadn't appreciated before: one team member's meticulous organization, another's sly sense of humor, and the subtle way their combined skills create a rhythm that carries us forward. Humor sneaks in, often a misnamed file, a sarcastic comment, the cat commandeering someone's chair, but it's no longer just a coping mechanism. It's part of the narrative, a signal that joy and absurdity coexist with persistence and productivity. I even catch myself using phrases like, "Historians still debate whether small actions lead to big changes," when explaining our choices to the team. It's almost ritualistic now, a gentle reminder that our journey is as much about observation, reflection, and iterative effort as it is about tangible outcomes. Each decision, each small triumph, and each humorous mishap reinforces the story I'm authoring, one that reframes past judgment as context rather than limitation. Lying in bed that night, the soft hum of the fan, the faint city noises, and the gentle creak of the apartment all form a lullaby of reflection. I let my mind wander through the events that brought us here, from late-night sketches to small victories, from chaos to collaboration. The story of my life, once dictated by the judgments of others, is now fully, irreversibly my own. I close my eyes, allowing the rhythm of effort, humor, and quiet triumph to settle over me. Imagining the chapters yet to come, each shaped by persistence, observation, and the audacity to rewrite a narrative long constrained by expectation. Momentum grows in ways I didn't anticipate. The team, once hesitant and skeptical, now moves with a fluidity that surprises even me. Tasks flow smoothly, meetings become productive rather than chaotic, and small victories accumulate like pebbles forming a solid path. Humor remains constant, spilled coffee, a sarcastic comment, the cat lounging on important documents, but it's no longer just relief. It's a binding thread, keeping energy light even as responsibility grows. Historians still debate the role of camaraderie in success, but living it feels irrefutably real. One morning, I wake to an email from a potential investor, expressing interest in our concept. My pulse quickens, but the apartment feels as familiar as ever. The fan hums, the faint aroma of coffee lingers, and the cat is perched on the windowsill, judging silently. I reread the message several times, half expecting it to vanish like a mirage, but it remains. The absurdity strikes me. I'm a former freeloader, now negotiating investment. I chuckle softly, imagining historians in the future debating how a threadbare hoodie could accompany the birth of a company. As preparations for a formal pitch begin, I notice the subtle evolution of myself and my team. Confidence has replaced hesitation. Collaboration has replaced skepticism. Meetings are peppered with laughter and constructive debate. One team member jokingly suggests an outlandish feature, and instead of dismissing it, we find a way to adapt it creatively. Humor becomes a tool, a way to dissolve tension and fuel innovation simultaneously. The apartment, once a backdrop of isolation, now serves as a stage for creativity, observation, and the quiet thrill of building something tangible. That evening, I sit alone reflecting on the long journey, from the flyer on the lamppost to the late-night scribbles, from failure after failure to small victories that now compound. Every step has prepared me for this moment. Sensory details anchor 'neath the soft click of the laptop keys, the uneven glow of the kitchen light, the faint hum of the fan, the texture of my old hoodie still draped over my shoulders. Each detail is a thread in the narrative I've authored, weaving a story that once belonged to doubt and ridicule, but now belongs to persistence, humor, and quiet triumph. Lying in bed, I allow the soft, familiar sounds of the apartment to lull me into reflection. I think of the 12 years of whispered judgments, of moments that seemed insignificant, of absurdities that unexpectedly guided me forward. The narrative I once inherited from others, one of dismissal and failure, has been rewritten, and as I close my eyes, letting the rhythm of effort, humor, the day of the official pitch arrives with a quiet hum of anticipation. I wake early, the apartment bathed in the soft glow of morning light filtering through half-closed blinds. Fan worried gently overhead. My cat curls lazily on the windowsill, completely indifferent to the momentous day. I sip coffee slowly, savoring both its warmth and its comforting bitterness, letting the small, familiar sensory details anchor me. Humor bubbles up involuntarily, mooder to myself. If historians ever track startup rituals, my morning caffeine worship will be Exhibit A. The team gathers in the apartment, papers in hand, laptops glowing, energy electric with a mix of nerves and excitement. Former critics turned collaborators offer words of encouragement, subtle jokes to ease tension, and a quiet, shared acknowledgement of how far we've come. I glance around at their focused faces, remembering the 12 years of whispered judgment and scorn, the absurdity of the entire journey, and the sheer improbability of this moment. Each laugh, each small quip, each corrective comment feels like a tiny celebration, a reminder that progress can be both serious and delightfully chaotic. During the pitch, I feel a rhythm of syncopation between storytelling, data, and humor. I narrate the concept, blending insight with subtle sarcasm, sprinkling in small anecdotes about the development process. Investors nod, some smile, a few chuckle at the lightly absurd moments, and I notice how the sensory details, the click of a pen, the faint hum of laptops, the soft flutter of papers form an unexpected ASMR backdrop that calms both me and the room. Historians might argue that presentation style doesn't determine success. Yet the combination of authenticity, humor, and rhythm feels powerful, undeniably so. Afterward, the feedback is overwhelmingly positive. Offers of partnership, investment, and collaboration trickle in, confirming what I've long suspected. Persistence, creativity, and subtle audacity eventually find their reward. The team celebrates quietly, savoring the mixture of relief, pride, and disbelief. I look around at each face, recalling how judgmental eyes once dismissed me, and a soft laugh escapes my lips. Life, in its strange irony, has woven the very people who doubted me into the fabric of my success. That night, I lie in bed, the apartment alive with the soft, familiar symphony of fan hum, distant city sounds, and the gentle creak of settling floors. I reflect on the journey, 12 years of scorn, small steps of persistence, late-night scribbles, odd coincidences, failed experiments, and eventual small victories compounded into a life that feels like mine. Every sensory detail, every subtle absurdity, every humorous misstep has contributed to this point. I close my eyes, letting the rhythm of creation, humor, and quiet triumph lull me, knowing that the journey continues, richer and more unpredictable than ever. Now, let your breathing slow, in and out, steady and calm. Picture the apartment fading gently around you, the soft hum of the fan becoming a distant, comforting lullaby. Feel the texture of the old kitchen table, the warmth of the sunlight that once filtered through the blinds, the faint aroma of coffee lingering as a gentle memory. Each sound, each scent, each small detail blends into a serene rhythm, softening the edges of the day. Imagine the team's laughter, light and easy, dissolving into a quiet echo. The cat's soft padding, a gentle heartbeat, the city noises far away, softened by distance. Let the sensation of movement fade, the pacing, the scribbling, the clicking keys, all slowing into a tender, rhythmic pulse. Your mind drifts, aware of effort and persistence, but comforted by the order created from chaos. See yourself in that space, at peace, the years of judgment melting into the background, absorbed by quiet triumph. Recall the small victories, the humor, the absurdities that guided you, and allow them to settle like a soft blanket around your consciousness. With each exhale, release tension. With each inhale, welcome calm. The journey continues, but for now, it's enough to simply feel the rhythm, the warmth, the gentle unfolding of possibility. Let your thoughts grow faint, like a story being whispered from far away, each detail softening until it blends into the quiet darkness. The hum of the fan, the distant city, the memory of laughter and light, let them carry you toward rest. And as you drift, know that the narrative of persistence, humor, and subtle triumph lives on quietly, endlessly, inside you.